Welcome to the Hustler's Manifesto podcast. We jailbreak from toxic hustle culture. We take hustler back from a belief that bigger is better, security is contingent on compliance, and freedom is reserved for the powerful. I'm your host, Sarah Duran. I'm not here to tell you how to make a quick buck. I'm here to change the way work is done so that we can live more meaningful lives right now instead of betting on an uncertain future. If you value this content, please rate it and comment on this podcast wherever you get it. If you're a freelancer, consultant, or solopreneur who needs better strategy for your business, learn more about what I do at fruitioninitiatives.com. Thanks for being part of the movement. Hi, Una. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
I'm doing great. It is so lovely to see both of your faces.
Great to
And-
see you
And
too, Sarah.
likewise, you've been
You
a
always
great
put us into a good mood, Sarah.
Likewise, when I confirmed with you yesterday, Una, and you were like, and you said that, I was like, yes, the feeling is very mutual. I know
Yeah,
that I'm going
it's
to have a
all-
great rest of my day after this conversation.
Yeah, it's always breath of fresh air talking to you.
Let's get started. I know we will have tons to talk about, but let's get started so that everyone can get to know both of you and the indie list a little bit more. Peter, if you want to kick us off with, who are you, what is your work, and why do you do it?
Okay, so who am I? Peter McPartlin. My background is primarily advertising, and within that, the kind of media space. So a lot of agency work, advertising agency work, media agency over the course of my career, and then went into the radio business to run one of the large independent radio stations, and then back into agency life, doing some consultancy work. And then I met this lady called Úna Herlihy. We met earlier. We'd worked together in BBDO. And we met again during COVID and had a conversation about trying to help some freelancers. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Love it.
Una.
Una?
So, yeah, Sarah, Úna Herlihy. I started my career in advertising back a long time ago. Everybody was wearing shoulder pads. And I worked for a long time in creative agencies and I absolutely loved it. I loved the buzz of working with big brands and creating like the big sort of TV commercials. That was like the holy grail at the time. And in about 2005, I had a couple of small kids. I wanted more freedom and flexibility in my life. And I decided I was going to become a freelancer. And I did that. And it was really tough and very hard, but I'm really glad that I did it. And I continued to do that. I worked for myself for about 15 years, mostly actually doing agency selection, matching big clients with big agencies and putting the conditions in for great relationships to take root. And that was the thing that I was always really passionate about, this idea that great work comes from a great relationship. And so I was doing those kind of macro matches for years. And then COVID hit 2020 and everything changed. And as Peter said, Peter and I worked together in an ad agency for a number of years. And when COVID happened, we just got together and started talking about how we could do something that was going to really add value for people who were in a really tricky spot, because a lot of people's pipeline of work disappeared overnight. And when you're a freelancer, that's really scary. And both myself and Peter had this idea that we would create a sort of a place where people like us could find work, but also could feel like part of a like-minded community. That's what we started off doing. And that's been the Indie List story for the last 4 years nearly. It's hard to believe that it's nearly 4 years.
It's funny,
we're
Sarah,
still
when
each other.
we started it, it was designed primarily. So it wasn't even designed at all. There wasn't any grand plan. Una was getting calls from freelancers that she would have worked with. And I was talking to people as well who I would have worked with in a different space who are looking for work. And Una had developed the idea of the list, putting together a list and kind of basically, our black books, if you like, and helping those people to find work. But I suppose for a lot of people who've been freelancing for a long time, or people who'd been in the creative business, particularly in Irish agencies and so on, probably saw freelancing as a kind of a passing phase, especially for creative people, that it's something that you went through almost as a kind of a rite of passage, and probably never really looked on it for the most part as a kind of a destination. And I think that's really changed. And I think we've certainly seen that over the course of the last 4 years. And I think sometimes freelance suffers from that thing as, oh, it's just a phase that you're going through and you'll grow up and get a proper job at some point. But I think that has definitely changed. It's changed in the Irish market, and it's clearly changed in other markets as well. And I think there's more respect attached to the fact that people have chosen that route through which to earn and to live and so on. And it's getting, I think, a lot of freelancers to believe in themselves as well. And I know it's something that you've touched on other podcasts, and having that kind of mindset that kind of
Mm.
sets them up for success rather than short-term success, but also long-term success. And
Mm.
when we set up the Indie List as a proper entity, we said separately what we would do is write down our principles. And lo and behold, we did them separately. And they were essentially the same 9 things that we both wrote down at the time. Isn't that true?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, you said there at the beginning, why do we do what we do? And Peter's right. We had no master plan here at all. We were really inspired by what was going on in the world around us, around this kind of unbelievable disruption. And we thought those people who decide to leave the comfort of a salary job and take the road less traveled and back themselves and follow their North Star, or whatever expression you want to use. But what that sort of that thing in people that makes them make that decision, we just like really think that's amazing. And like when we see that in people, we go, you're fantastic. And we want to help create a scaffolding for you, because we know that being freelance gives you great freedom, gives you great flexibility, but it isn't without its challenges. There's some parts of it that are really tough. And I learned that myself the hard way when I went out on my own in 2005, thinking, oh, this will all be really easy. And all of a sudden I realized that the stuff that I'd taken for granted in my salary job was something that I was going to have to look after by myself, like looking after all my finances, sorting out my tech if there was a problem, having a team around you you could bounce ideas off all the time, and all of that sort of stuff. It's really difficult when you start to work for yourself. And we thought, look, there has to be a role that we can play in helping people around the trickier aspects of working as a self-employed person. And so we developed this mantra with the Indie List, which we call Earn, Learn and Connect. And the earn part of what we do is helping people find jobs and find projects, find gigs, or whatever the case may be. But and that's where we make our money. But the other part of what we do, which is about learning and connecting, is about creating a kind of a community for our people where they feel that they can learn something new, they can develop their careers, they can reach out to us if they've got a problem. We're not the social services. We make that very clear. But when we see somebody who has the courage to take that path less traveled, we tip our hat to them and we go, look, we're here to help you, providing you can go into a role and bring your A game and add loads of value and be a great person to work with, because that's also really important to us. When we wrote down our kind of 9 principles, I think we probably had 10, but we left one off our website, which was blowhards and prima donnas need not apply. Because look, we've all worked with kind of tricky people in our careers, and it's just kind of not worth it. Like,
Clients don't have time for that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like as Una said, it's providing that kind of scaffolding. I think that's a really good word. We haven't actually used that before, but I think it is a really good word, because one of the things that we've tried to do is fly the flag for freelancers within the space that we occupy, which is the marketing services area, Sarah, because freelancers, because they've been flying solo for the most part, and everyone does, there's been no kind of unifying body, certainly not in the Irish case, where they go to fight the corner on behalf of freelancers. Now, it was difficult for us to do when we had 55 people on the list, but when you've 1,300 people, you can make a bit of noise, and you build up a kind of a brand reputation and a tone of voice and an attitude without being cheeky and without being disrespectful to clients or to the industry at large. But at least I think people who are with us, I think, believe that we fairly represent on behalf of the interests of freelancers. Like today, for instance, we walked away from a client because they wanted to implement a 45-day payment terms for a freelancer. And we just said, there's no way. We've 14 days and we think that's not unreasonable to pay a freelancer. But this is a big accountancy company. They're a relatively new client, but we just said we can't work on that basis. And you wouldn't expect your own workers to get paid 45 days after they complete a body of work. So I think it's taking stances like that. Now, we don't do it every month and you can't afford to do it every month, but certainly we've stood up to clients where we just said, no, we just can't. You can't expect people to work on that basis. So it's that thing of fairness on both sides, making sure that freelancers deliver what they say they're going to deliver, but also making sure that they get paid. And I think by virtue of the fact that we've been around now for almost 4 years, we carry a degree of weight and respect within the market, which is important for freelancers, and clearly it's important for us as well.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, what you're both saying in slightly different ways about this like mindset piece, or this you can sense it when you talk to someone. More and more, I'm starting to think that freelancers might be born and not made. Like there's something that you can see in people, which is why I think that it's not the skill set that makes you successful. It's the mindset.
Yeah.
And having people around, bringing together people that share that drive and that mindset, or even like the beginnings of that mindset and need a little bit more help, like developing it. Because
Yeah.
one of the reasons why groups like yours are so important is because it not only are we usually alone, but we're alone in a way where it's no one teaches us how to do this. Like we're all taught how to be employees. We're taught to let other people make decisions for us and take care of us and do things like that. And we should all be taking care of each other. But there's something different that you have to figure out how to do when you become a independent worker. And that
And I think,
that intermediary role that y'all play is just so not intermediary. I think scaffolding, the word you use, Peter, is crucial.
yeah, it is. And actually, just the thing about freelancing and freelancers, and they learn it on the job. I think freelancers need to be reminded of how great that they are, because going in and hitting the ground running in an organization or in one company in January, and 4 months later hitting the ground running in another company with a completely different culture, completely different set of challenges, and you still have to bring your A game, that sort of exercises a muscle that not everybody has. And it makes people really valuable, because if you can, because in our business, and I'm sure in every business and in every industry, we are dealing with unprecedented problems, and the rate and the pace of change within our industry is just, it would make your head spin. Freelancers are able to weave their way into those worlds and fit in pretty quickly, make connections pretty quickly, help to solve problems really quickly. And that is, and I think it goes back to this idea, Sarah, of born not made, because you have to be wired in a certain way to cope with that chaos and actually to thrive in spite of it. And we talk about our community of freelancers as freelancers by choice and freelancers by circumstance. And the ones that are freelance by circumstance they maybe have been made redundant, or they've come to some big kind of personal decision in their lives where they need to just take a little bit of stock, and they come out from the big job and they think, okay, I might contract for a while. I might pick up a few freelance roles, thinking that it's just as easy as that. And inevitably they'll go back into a job because they find the parts about freelancing that born freelancers actually have accepted as the norm. And I think I'm one of those people like that would have been a born freelancer I did it for 15 years. It was like Peter, the idea of working with Peter again was the thing that brought me back
Filled you full of
into.
dread.
Yeah, I'll make hay now for a while with this. Peter be very well connected. As like we would have a saying here in Ireland, a laying hen. Peter would be regarded as a bit of a laying hen in Ireland.
Never been
We
called a
well
hen
got.
before, yeah. I'm not sure. Take that as a compliment or
Well,
an
just 'cause-
insult. Yeah.
Something must be working because you're 4 years in and it's still, not only is it working, but tell us a little bit about the journey of the indie list, because you've been growing really fast. Like you said, you both came to the table with really strong reputations in the market, but now indie list has this sort of really strong reputation in and of itself. Tell us a little bit about the journey of building this thing.
Yeah, no grand plan, Sarah. As Una said, we didn't set out with this kind of let's take over the world thing. I think it's evolved. We've learned quite a bit. We've learned from people like you, and you've been so generous with your time in terms of the advice that you've given us, but also given our freelancers as well. But dealing with people like John and Matt and complementary businesses like Olive and Uncompany and so on, we've just learned so much from people like that. If we knew now if we knew then when we started at the Indie List, compared to what we know now, we probably would have never started. We just said there was no room. How do we find a niche that can sustain us, but also sustain all of the kind of people who work on behalf of the indie list and grow it and develop it? Because you do have to think what's next. And that's what we've tried to do. So one of the things that we've been looking at recently is that Ireland in the marketing is the area that we focus on. The business has been regarded as having a talent problem. So the Irish economy, as probably everybody knows across the world, the Irish economy has been in boom time for a long period of time. Maybe not so much in the last year, but nonetheless still performing better than most of kind of European neighbours. And it's also the home for a lot of tech companies, and marketing services and agencies have suffered as a result of that, maybe 4 or 5 years back, where they couldn't recruit people straight out of college. So the best grads were going into the tech companies. They were losing some of their best people to the tech companies as well. And as a result of that, agencies were probably not, they lost the confidence of a lot of clients. So there was a regard of a talent problem. And nobody ever looked at kind of freelancers as being part of the solution for that. And what we're saying now is that freelancers and the freelancer layer needs to be regarded as a kind of reframing of that talent problem into a talent solution. And I think the agencies have always used them, but it's getting the clients now to realize that, or enough clients to realize that. And that's where a lot of our focus is. It's less on agencies. It's not to say that we don't want agency business, we do, but more and more it's convincing some of the larger enterprises and the kind of medium-sized enterprises that you don't need to save up and hire a full-time strategic marketing officer. You can get the best straight away by her fractional, or you don't need to get somebody who's on your books to do your social media. You can get the best of the best to do it on a contract basis. As I say, it's reframing the problem into a solution for clients. And that's what we've spent last couple of months doing. So launching new services, as well as the kind of short-term revenue gains that we get out of hiring people on a short-term basis. But it's looking at added value services of things like fractional CMO, marketing audits, where we've also developed a product with a freelancer around AI training, for instance. A lot of new services that, again, naturally fall into the area of freelancing or consulting that wouldn't have been on our radar maybe less than 12 months ago.
Just the other thing that I wouldn't like to say about our whole journey is that, and I don't want to over egg this idea of no master plan. We didn't set out to build a big business. We set out to help people out in a really difficult time. We saw that there was a gap in our market in Ireland, and we decided that we were going to go for it. And we just moved really quickly. But our approach to building the whole business, I think, has been informed by our collective experience over the last 30 years working in marketing and in advertising. And I suppose we would have always said, just do the right thing and the revenue will follow. I suppose how we call it is we want to be a lighthouse. We want the Indie List to be a lighthouse for our members, but also for our clients and our partners. And what that means for us in practice is that we stand for something. So we stand for freelancers, we stand for adding value, we stand for being really transparent and open, we stand for being really fair. All the stuff that both myself and Peter sat down and worked out, thought about what was really important to us when we were building that business. So that's what we stand for. So when you're a lighthouse, you stand for something, you show up where your audience is. We're a small business. Like, we haven't taken 1 cent on in terms of investment from anybody else. Like, we've basically broken open our piggy banks and we're bootstrapping this business from the get-go. So we have to be really smart about how we show up, where we show up, and what we say to people when we're there. And so we use LinkedIn a huge amount. We need to get better at all of that sort of stuff. But we stand for something. We show up where our audience is. We try to be as consistent as possible. And I guess the most important thing that we do is we add value, we solve problems, we provide utility, whatever. So that's our kind of, I know I'm mixing metaphors, but the lighthouse is our sort of North Star. That's what we want to be strong. We want to be stable. We want to provide a light for people. And it's very true to the place where we came from. And that's so important to us. Like, we came from a genuine desire to help people out. Like, when we started off as a pro bono initiative. So we started off as myself and Peter saying, how can we give something back to our industry, the industry that has been really good to us? And I think we've obviously planned every year, planned every quarter. Sometimes they're planning every week. And, but when you just like pare it right back to its simplistic form, it is about that. And that's really important to us.
By the way, Sarah, his husband paints lighthouses. Doesn't mean he actually paints the lighthouse. He paints pictures of lighthouses. And he's very good at it as well. I'm only realizing that now. Now I'm getting why you used the metaphor.
Why I keep on banging on about lighthouses.
It's the perfect metaphor. The thing, it ties together what you said earlier too, Peter, is when you're talking about, we're talking about how freelancers, even though freelancers require this like independent, this indie spirit, right?
Yeah.
Like, you
Yes.
can't do it if you don't have that.
Yeah.
And you also can't do it. The other thing that separates not just successful, but I think long-term, happy, fulfilled freelancers from other freelancers is this sense of community, which I think is hard won, especially
Yeah.
in circumstances where people don't have organizations like the Indie List there holding the space for that kind of community. But you also said the same thing about, I'm not sure what the right word, like, sometimes when I talk about the Indie List, I use the word agency, but I'm not sure if that's like how, like, Karina uses the word ecosystem for hers, but
Yeah.
folks that run companies like yours also need this level of community. Like, you talked about how you learned so much, like, doing it by yourself wouldn't have been possible, right? You learned so
Sure.
much from other people doing this in other parts of the world. And your lighthouse, it just made me think about how freelancers are existing within this nested ecosystem where, like, these organizations and communities that support freelancers also need these supportive systems around them, and vice versa. The things that make Indie List stand out and other organizations like yours, like this lighthouse metaphor, doing the right thing and the revenue will follow, is also, I think, the way that the most amazing freelancers succeed. Where you're like, I stand for something.
Yeah.
I have a strong brand. I have a strong point of view. I stand by my work. And those kind of parallels, I think, are just really interesting.
Yeah.
We obviously do a lot of community-based activities, Sarah, and you've been part of those, the various webinars and so on that we do. None of those are revenue generating from our point of view, and they take up a fair bit of time. It's time that we could probably spend on business development. And we've jostled with that a bit over in recent times, but we said it's really important that we do that stuff because that's why we set up the Indie List. It wasn't just to earn money. Clearly, we're a business and we need to earn money. But if we didn't do those other things, then we'd just be another platform or a platform.
Right.
And I think we're more than that. I think, without being lofty about it, I think what we have is a conscience. We set it up from a good place. We set it up as a pro bono initiative. Clearly, we couldn't keep that going if we wanted to turn it into a business. But nonetheless, the essence of that, we believe, is still there. And the things that we've done to maintain that are really important, because what it does, or all of those activities do, is to bond our best freelancers to us. Thankfully, look, it's not that we've had a market to ourselves. There's always been competition for talent and the provision of talent, whether it's recruitment agencies. In the last couple of weeks, we've had a small platform set up that specializes in TV production people, for instance. Now, it's not an area that we ever had expertise in, but nonetheless, we've never taken it for granted. We're the only player in town, so basically we can do what we like. But I think if we didn't put in place some of those things to benefit our community without kind of benefiting profit, then I don't think there's a future for the indie list. We're just another marketplace alongside
Yeah.
all of the other hundreds of other marketplaces and the big global ones. You're into a commodity play then.
Right.
And I think more
Yeah.
and more, certainly some of the things that have emerged out of the trend tracker, for instance, that John and Matt have done, is that brand has become really important as a distinguisher, a differentiator. When companies choose to work and hire people, then they look at the kind of brand reputation or the clout that an individual provider will have, as well as clearly the talent that it has as well. As Una says, what we've done by accident or design, we've managed to build a really strong brand, not in a kind of a conventional kind of marketing sense, but clearly we've used some of the learning that we've had from our own careers in doing so.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you're saying that, Peter, something that I'm thinking about too is that I think it sounds like a catch-22, but it's not, is that approaching it from a standpoint where you're like, we're gonna do the right thing and the revenue will follow, also leads to the revenue, right? Because I think that that kind of, like you said, like standard or conscience not only brings in the right types of freelancers, but it brings in the right types of clients. So
Yes.
Yeah.
you're not mass marketing to the because you have this level of this like value system that you operate within that is very clear. The types of clients that you're, and again, this doesn't mean 100%. Like once in a while, you're going to have to say no to someone, but
Yeah.
it means that you're bringing in both the right types of clients and the right types of freelancers that have those shared values. Because something that I recognize from like my work from the freelancer end is that we can get so much out of free communities, but there's something different about having skin in the game. There's
Mhm.
something
Yeah.
different about being part of something where you feel invested in it in a way where it's financially, maybe it's like some sort of bartering or whatever it is, but
Yes.
you feel invested in it in a different way. And so I think while the pro bono is an important part of this impetus to set the
Yeah.
foundation for this value system, it also, I think, transcending beyond that is not just about let's make money and build a business. It also
Yeah.
changes, I think, the
Good.
calculus for the people who are involved with you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was like that whole thing happened in a moment in time, like back May 2020. We didn't know what was happening in the world and it was crazy. And then this sort of small little idea just came out of nowhere. People just latched onto it. And when we started off, first of all, we benefited from so much goodwill. It was really fantastic. And it was the wind at our back in those early days. Now we're 4 years on from that, so we can't keep on banging on about it, even though that's exactly what I'm doing right now. But it is still a very big part of our kind of our brand, our origin story. It's so important to us. And it actually is the kind of that whole value set from the beginning becomes a really useful tool for decision making. So, for example, we talked a couple of years ago about making the indie list a subscription model for members, so they pay to become a member. And we said, does that kind of sit with the thing that we really believed in the beginning? And it didn't. So we said, okay, we're going to knock that on the head. We're not going to do it. Being really clear about what was so important to us, what was driving us, what as you say, the impetus was for it, has become a great way for us to certain kind of crossroads and make certain decisions. And like we still, I don't think, have fully landed on how we would describe ourselves. So you said agency there, Sarah, and in a way, while we don't necessarily refer to ourselves as an agency, it's probably the closest to what we are, because what we do is we represent these great individuals that choose to work for themselves. We help them have agency over their own careers, which is a really important part of what we do, flying the flag for freelancers. And we talk about ourselves being a platform. We're not really a platform. Like we do have a platform that allows us to be efficient operationally and manage our community and talk to our community. And we work with the guys in Bupty. I don't know if you've come across them, and we've been working with them for the last sort of nearly coming up to a year. Wow, can't believe that. On creating a UX for our platform that actually is the technology version of how we speak to people on a daily basis. And so it is quite bespoke. So we don't really call ourselves a platform. We don't really call ourselves a marketplace, because it suggests a sort of a transactional relationship between us and clients and between us and freelancers. And whatever, we are definitely not transactional, because look, we're Irish, we work in a small, very small industry. Both myself and Peter are well connected in a small industry, in a small marketplace. And Irish people are known for building relationships and actually from almost making transactions more human. And that's a really important part of how we operate. So we're not a marketplace. We're not an agency. We're not a platform. What the hell are we? I guess we're matchmakers, maybe, or all of the
Sing,
above.
and we like a sing-song club as well, don't we? We like to sing now and again, yeah.
I love it. I think that's part of again, just I keep reflecting on these parallels between these. I'm going to use the word ecosystem, because I think that's the
Yeah,
word. Like when Corinne
great.
used that word, I
Yes,
was like,
Mhm.
that feels what
that's
it
it.
is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's these ecosystems and the parallels, like again, the like nestedness of the individual freelancer within this ecosystem and the ecosystem within an ecosystem of ecosystems, where I think freelancers also struggle with that. What do you call yourself? There is
Yes.
no, the like
Yeah.
traditional job titles and like all these, like it doesn't, because an independent worker, just like an ecosystem like yours, is creating something that is different and new and actually hasn't existed before
Mm,
and is completely unique. There is
mm,
no, it transcends title. It transcends
yeah. So
label. Like there's no, that's why there's no
yeah,
good word for it, is because it is completely unique to you.
it is completely unique, and we have members of our community who wouldn't even refer to themselves as freelancers, because for them,
Yeah.
they associate the term freelance with gun for hire, comes in case of emergency, as Mary Casey would say, comes in to stop the bleeding. And whereas other people are more consultative,
Yeah.
and call themselves independent consultants, other people will call themselves fractional workers or fractional C-suite. So yeah, there isn't one term that covers everything, and that's okay. I think for us, they're indies. They're people who have decided to, for one reason or another, to back themselves, to turn their back on the corporate world to a certain extent. They've been there, done that. They've had the corner office. They've done the 9 to 9. They don't need to prove themselves anymore. They've gone so far up the ladder that they're actually getting further and further away from the thing that they love doing.
Mhm.
And that's why they come to us. So we want to, back to the lighthouse, we want to build a really strong brand that attracts that really high quality talent to us. When we have the high quality client, don't we have the high quality client with
And I think a lot of people get hung up for an industry, if I can call it an industry, of kind of independent talent. There's so many terms, Sarah, and you've touched on them there, whether it's gigsters or whatever. There's so many different references to what we and other companies like ours represent. But for clients, it's sometimes hard to beat just calling them freelancers, because there's a danger that we might overcomplicate this thing. by dressing it up in terms that are just meaningless to a lot of clients who want to hire really good people. So to my mind, it's hard to beat the freelance term, and let's be proud of it because look, it has its own really good origin story, which, as you know it yourself. And I think for an industry, as I say, we like you spend a lot of time talking to companies like us as well. Oh God, there's an awful lot of jargon that we invent between us. And I think for clients, they just, as I say, want to hire really good people. And I think the more we complicate it, the more removed that we get from that. Again, Matola spoke about it recently as well. And he talked about, is this something new we're selling or is it new to you? And I think for a lot of companies, it's new to them because they've never considered freelancers as an alternative to hiring somebody on a full-time basis or for a particular project or job or whatever might need to be done. So it's not that we're trying to sell something new, it's just something that's new to them. And I think sometimes we sometimes forget that.
I
And
think
so a
the
lot of our
thing,
activity now is getting that message out there of, did you ever think of hiring a freelancer? Because
well, I think one of the things maybe to add to that, Peter, is this idea that people are familiar with the concept of freelancers and hiring a freelancer,
Mm,
but it's a little bit like the idea of not really knowing what good looks like.
yeah,
So I might need somebody to do my social media for me to create some TikToks, but I don't know what a good TikTok
Right.
is and how it differs from a bad TikTok.
mm,
So as a customer, being able to go to the indie list and say, you tell me what good looks like and I'll believe you. And so we constantly have to keep on our game in that regard so that we are trustworthy, that people will come to us. That's the value that myself and Peter can bring, is that understanding of who's good, what value can they add. And that's why our vetting process is a really important part of what we do. Like at the moment, you can sign up on the indie list, but you won't necessarily get onboarded because you may not necessarily make the cut. And when we started off, first of all, there were no kind of barriers. Anyone could join up, but we've had to be a lot more selective in that regard. So not, and like actually a lot of the other sort of similar businesses that we deal with through Matt and John Younger, they have like maybe for every 10 people that apply, maybe only one gets through. Now, we're a little bit more open than that, but it's just an interesting way of maintaining the quality within the talent pool.
yeah. And it also means that freelancers generally are not reduced to a commodity.
Yeah.
There's a danger that clients, and we keep saying to clients, don't pick the person that's the cheapest on the list. The person who's the most expensive will probably get it done cheaper, or sorry, quicker, I should say,
Mm.
and faster, and in the long run, much more cost efficiently than just hiring somebody who'll do your TikToks for $20 or whatever.
We could talk all day,
For
which would
hours.
make my day even better if that's what I got to do with the rest of my day. And we'll definitely have you guys back again real soon.
Thanks,
But
Sarah.
thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
You,
You
Sarah, yeah?
obviously are some of my most favorite folks in the larger freelance ecosystem.
Thank you, Sarah.
And I'm really glad we
Same.
had to have this conversation. And we'll make sure to link to the indie list and your LinkedIn profiles and all that kind of stuff that goes live.
Sarah,
That would be
thanks
great,
again.
Sarah.
And we reference it along the way as well. But again, you've been really helpful to us and also very generous with your own time as well. And we know any time that we have you on to do a couple of those webinars, we always get a fantastic reaction because I think what you do is you provide that kind of layer of advice that we don't often hear from. I'm not saying the other people that we get aren't great as well, but I think you do it in a different way. And I think anybody who's been on those webinars comes away from a feeling that there is much more to this than just meets the eye, and just having that, as you that phrase that you have, which is great, that boss mindset is really important. So again, thank you on behalf of myself and Una for all the work that you do.
Thanks so much, Peter. All right.
Sarah.
I'll
Good
talk
to
to you guys
see
again
you.
real soon.
Thank you, Sarah.